Welcome to Leadership Unfiltered, the podcast where real leaders get real about what it takes to succeed in today's fast-paced corporate world. I'm Dr. Dayan Douse, founder and president of P.R.I.D.E Consulting, a human behavior and development company serving as an executive coach and facilitator, working with organizations to deliver practical ways to evolve teams, advance organizations, and transform cultures. I hold a PhD in organization and management with over 2 decades of leadership experience in Fortune 500 companies. And I'm best-selling co-author of the book, Nothing But Net. I'm joined by my co-host, Phillip Smith. Phillip is a seasoned technology executive with extensive experience leading large-scale engineering teams and driving digital transformation. Over his 25 years of leadership experience, he has held multiple roles from supervisor to vice president. His personal brand is coder by blood, architect by trade, and leader by choice. Every episode will deliver real-world strategies, unfiltered advice, and the tools you'll need to take your leadership to the next level. Let's get started. All right, so our topic today is leaders who embrace healthy conflict. And so when I think about healthy conflict, immediately you think of conflict as being negative. And really, I want to change that perception here in our topic to say conflict isn't always negative, that it really can be constructive for your teams, for your organizations, and as a leader, encouraging that environment and culture so that there is healthy conflict is a good thing, because that healthy conflict really is all about perspective.
Yes.
What you need to be is open to different backgrounds and opinions and experiences that provide those perspectives. And my friends at a company I partner with, Deption, have come up with this term called colliding perspectives. And really the colliding piece of the perspectives is we don't really see eye to eye. Your perspective is different than mine. And when we share those perspectives, they collide. And that creates the conflict. What we've also learned is that an element of growth is those colliding perspectives. Because if you are open to different backgrounds and opinions and experiences, even though you have a perspective, that is when you broaden that perspective, when you are open to new ideas. It may, cause you to evaluate where you are in your comfort zone.
Mm-hmm.
You learn and grow and develop when you are open to listening to different perspectives. And so we teach leaders to try to encourage that environment where their teams are open to share those perspectives. And we talk about diversity.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a big part of the diversity conversation, which says there's a different perspective in a room, and you want to be open to that perspective, because I might actually learn from somebody else's experience that might help me, and that's where the growth and development come in. Start with that kind of definition to frame up our topic around leaders who encourage healthy conflict.
Yeah, I think I agree that conflict in and of itself isn't healthy or unhealthy. It's how you handle it, how you respond to it, and how do you encourage healthy responses to conflict, and how do you steer away from unhealthy responses to conflict. But I absolutely understand that healthy conflict is that's what the industry has kind of termed it. And I can accept that. The framing of how do we respond to things is a, pun intended, healthier framing.
Yeah.
And so I think there's an opportunity as leaders to say, you want to encourage conflict. Because as you said, there's growth there. There is an opportunity to learn. There's an opportunity to expand. And I think back on one of the situations that shaped my leadership, which was we had a big deliverable that was due. There was a conflict in terms of how to best get there. Do we continue down the path where the architecture we know was dead-ended because the vendor told us this thing will be end of life. We will no longer offer you support. Or do you risk hitting your deadline by changing the architecture to one that you know will have a long-term future, that has a viable path forward? And so you knew you would be able to hit your date. We knew we'd be able to hit the date if we stayed with the dead architecture. But we weren't sure whether or not we could hit the date if we changed the architecture. And there was really, I won't say warring factions, but pretty darn close to what should take priority. Is it hitting the deadline that we committed to the customer and making sure that we can deliver to that? Or is it making sure that we have a long-term viability? Because again, the more investment that you make in that dead architecture, the more sunk costs you're putting in, and that you're going to have to eventually migrate over anyway. And that conflict and watching that unfold in terms of, because I was an individual contributor at the time. I was a coder, I was a developer. And watching how the leadership handled that conflict really shaped to say, oh yeah, you could go down and you splinter the team. Or you could use as an opportunity to bring folks together. And what I learned from who led that team was it's really important to surface the conflict, have the conversation, open and out, and let everyone voice their perspective. And then at the end of the day, make the call.
Yes.
And be unapologetic about making the call. That was like, that's how you do it. And then I've taken that with me to say, you have to surface it. So you can't have this belief that conflict is bad or conflict is inherently unhealthy. It's a good thing because it allows you to make a really good decision. Because the points that were brought up, now because I am a futurist, I'm a strategist, I'm wired towards the future. I'm like, we need to go to the new architecture. That was the camp I was in. But being able to actually listen to the other side and the points that they were making, they were valid points. And what it allowed us to do once the decision was made, it allowed us to incorporate the valid points that were being made. Not all of them, but a lot of the valid points are being made in terms of why we should stick with the platform. It allowed to mitigate a lot of those risks, which we would have never been able to mitigate them had we not surfaced the conflict. And so that was such a great lesson for me, even before I began my formal leadership journey, to watch how you do that and why it's so important that you not silence the minority and that you surface the conflict in a very healthy way, in a very transparent way, and also be unapologetic about making the decision.
Yes, that's good. And most of the time in organizations, on teams, so there's conflict between individuals, teams, departments, organizations.
Yes.
Organizations and customers, right? And typically what I've found is revolves around change. A lot of the conflict comes because there's a change that needs to happen. And one side sees the direction in one way, and the other side sees it in a different way. And that's, again, based on their experiences and their skills and their backgrounds and what opinions they bring. But there's a change that is occurring. And like you said, the word, how you respond is really where the conflict either escalates or gets resolved, is the parties that are involved, how they respond to the different perspectives. So if I'm closed and I am stuck on my own perspective as being the right way and the only way and what we've done in the past, and not open to somebody else's perspective on a possible change to how we're doing things, then that conflict will stay a conflict. It won't be constructive. Many times they close down to the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And so that keeps that conflict escalated. You'll find that many parties will just go silent in a conflict, right? I'm stuck on my opinion and the way we should go, and so I don't need to listen to this anymore. And they will, quote unquote, take their ball and go home.
Yes.
Right? And so now the conflict is not healthy. It is not being resolved because you have somebody that is not willing to change. And so a healthy conflict, one of the elements of a healthy conflict is that the parties have to be willing to change their perspective, change their mindset, change what they're willing to do and not do, what they're willing to tolerate. All of those things help in it being healthy. When we talk about conflict being healthy, that's where the healthy part comes in, is that you're not entrenched in your own way of doing things and thinking, that you're open to. And that's where the growth comes in, is that you don't have to roll over in a conflict and just accept, opposite or colliding perspectives, but you got to at least be open to hearing what else is possible. And if you're willing to do that, then it's healthy. And a leader, if that environment doesn't exist, to your point about transparency, needs to call that out.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Now, depending on the environment, you may not want to call that out in front of everybody, but maybe you do. But maybe it's a one-on-one conversation, and it's a coaching opportunity to tell the person who is not open to different perspectives just that, right? You might want to take a moment, reflect on how you're responding, reflect on where you think there's only one way to do this, and open yourself up to different possibilities and what's possible. When you can create that type of environment, you get innovation, you get engagement, because now everybody feels like they're a part of the direction that you're moving, in a solution you're moving towards. Not that, well, this person has the answer, and so that's the way we're going. So a leader needs to just be intentional, creating that environment, and if they don't have it, those who are creating the unhealthy, if you can use that term, environment for conflict, you need to coach that person to help create that environment.
I personally had 10 laws of leadership that I collected over the years, and 2 that are applicable for this conversation. One I got from Lynn Allen, who was the CIO of DT Energy, and who I learned tremendous leadership lessons from. And she gave me this, but these come in pairs. So the first half is, you can be efficient with things, but you have to be effective with people.
That's good.
And then the second law that I learned, I got from my husband, which is, in order to be effective with people, you have to let go of being right. Those 2 laws together, like this is a set of 10, but those 2 are really applicable, which is, if you can be efficient with things, but you have to be effective with people. And if you want to be effective with people, you have to let go of being right.
Yes.
And in terms of conflict, if you can let go of being right, accept that you may, in fact, be wrong.
Yes.
There is a greater opportunity that you will learn something, and that you are able to create that environment. And there's this expectation that leaders are right that is so counterproductive. Because if you are the smartest person in the room, you should not be leading.
Yes.
Because you cannot be objective about the decisions that need to be made. You cannot judge the information that's coming in a way that allows you to absorb it and apply it to decision making. Because if you already know the answers, why is the team there? And so it's so important that as a leader, that you let go of being right, that you let go of having the right answer, or being the smartest person in the room. And that is how you can create an environment where you have healthy conflict.
Yes, yes, that's good. The other part of healthy is both sides knowing they're in the conflict.
Yes.
Because sometimes there's a conflict and one of the parties
Yes.
is in denial about the conflict.
Yes.
And so they don't even recognize that there is a conflict. They just assume that they are right.
Yes.
And they're like, I don't see the problem here. Part of it being healthy is recognizing there is a conflict. And I think you said surfacing that and then having the open discussion around it. But if you are in denial or just in refusal to see that there's a conflict, again, that is going to keep the conflict going. That is going to escalate the conflict. And many times, that problem that sits in the middle is causing the conflict. And the only way to resolve that problem that's sitting in the middle is for all parties who have a stake in that conflict come to the table to resolve it. If you are in denial or just refuse to be a part of the solution and respond in a healthy way to the conflict, then the problem can't be resolved. It will sit in the middle where one party is trying to resolve it but can't, not fully, because it requires for full resolution all parties involved to play their part, to stack hands and get that conflict resolved. If somebody is backed away from the table, then the problem's going to sit in the middle. We do a strategy game. Many people might know this game called Spaghetti Tower. It was a very interesting, shared this, but it just resonated with me that there was a group of leaders. So let me explain Spaghetti Tower. You have tables that are teams, and each table and team get a set of materials, which is dry spaghetti, string, tape, scissors, and the instruction is to construct the tallest tower using these materials. There are some rules that you can't hang it from the ceiling, you can't tape it to the floor or the table, you can't use other things to stand it up. It has to be freestanding. Using those materials in the tallest tower is what you're after. And so going through this exercise, the team is failing. The tower won't stand. And one of the leaders, paraphrasing the story, just crosses her arm, backs away from the table. You're asked, well, what's going on? And she says, this exercise, I give it a 0 out of 10. Well, why? And she says, because we keep failing at this, right? And so she was creating a conflict within her own table because she is no longer part of the solution. And it's because she had a perspective and a way that she thought this thing should be constructed, various perspectives and opinions around how they should best do it. You see that often in real life, right? That's just a game, if you will, to try to get people to work together in teams. But she found out something interesting about herself, which was she actually did that in life. When there was a conflict, those perspectives were colliding around how they should go about this. And it wasn't going her way, or the way she thought it would go, she would back away from it. You need to ask yourself, if there is a conflict, are you part of creating that conflict, and how are you helping to resolve it? And if you're backing away and crossing your arms because your perspective isn't being heard, isn't being taken as the way to go, then you're creating the conflict. That problem can't be fully resolved. You're not learning and growing. That team didn't learn and grow because her input wasn't a part of it. And so it was just one really good example. A little different scenario because it was about teams and not conflict. But man, did it draw some conflict
Mm-hmm.
out of it. And after she got that reflection and took time to reflect on how she handled that, she was like, okay, well, maybe the game is not 0 out of 10. I did actually learn something. So a little bit different in environment, but conflict showed up there.
You bring something to mind for me, which is around backing away and making yourself small. I remember very keenly being in a meeting where I was pulling back, pulling in, made myself very small based on what was unfolding in the meeting. And I had a mentor at the time who happened to be in the meeting at the same time. And he said to me, gave me some of the best advice. J.T. Tompkins was general auditor at DTE. And he gave me some of the best advice coming out of that meeting. He said, while what happened may not have been appropriate, which he dealt with in his way, he said, you're aspiring to be one of the executives of this company. You don't get to do that. Regardless, whether it's, no matter who's in the room, if you're going to lead, there are times when you have to lead your leader. There are times when you have to show up and you don't get the opportunity to go small. And he said, you gotta put your big boy pants on. And that was very hard for me to hear. One, because I was still pretty angry about what had happened. But secondly, that had been my MO. And he held up the mirror to say, if this is how you are operating, you're not ready. That was devastating to me. But he was right.
Yeah.
And it was so helpful. It was so incredibly helpful. Because from that moment, I had to decide if I'm going to lead, then that means I lead. And I don't get to take my ball and go home.
Yeah.
I don't get to cross my arms and say, hope that works out for you. I don't get to do that.
Yep.
If you're going to lead, you have to stay in. And staying in means creating a pathway to resolution.
Yes.
It doesn't mean staying in by being loud and stomping your feet.
Right.
It doesn't mean staying in by quiet quitting.
Mm-hmm.
It means you're in and you need to lead and you have to find that pathway to success, regardless of whether you are the superior or the subordinate in the room. You gotta lead.
Yes.
And that meant a lot to me. That one, that he would give me the feedback as directly as he did, and that it's transformative in terms of how to deal with conflict. It really is just a transformative aspect of leadership.
And honestly, I avoid conflict as a leader because I've learned I'm a pragmatist and I like both sides. I can see both sides of an argument. And I often stay in the middle, which is my safe space. And being a pragmatist and staying in the middle and seeing both sides has its advantages and can work well in an organization because you can see different perspectives and different sides. It being safe for me is it keeps me out of the conflict, right? Because I don't have to pick, right? I don't have to attack, a certain perspective or thing. I can just say, oh, well, I see this and I can see that. Now, I've learned that while there are benefits to being a pragmatist, there's benefits to seeing both sides and welcoming all perspectives. Conflict exists, and the only way that I'm going to learn and grow is to actually engage in the conflict and not stay in my comfort zone. But the truth of the matter is, I don't like conflict. I try to find ways to avoid the conflict in my pragmatist way of thinking as I've learned and grown as a leader and now as a coach of leaders is understanding, being aware that I don't like conflict, being aware of how I deal with change, which is my pragmatist way mindset, and then saying, okay, all conflict isn't bad. There are colliding perspectives, which is going to create conflicts. There are problems in the middle, which is going to create conflict. And the only way for me to learn and grow is how I respond to that conflict, and running away from it is not a good response, because we don't solve the problems. I don't learn and grow from it, and nobody else does either. So if you're somebody like me, spends their time in the middle, seeing all perspectives, just know that all conflict is not negative. It can be very constructive. Mm-hmm. And as a leader, you absolutely have to lean into conflict, because that's how you resolve those things that just sit in the middle. That's how you learn and grow. That's how you really create diversity. True diversity in an organization is creating that culture where there is colliding perspectives, but that they're respected. People are safe to share those perspectives and know that even if there's a conflict, we'll get through it.
That last closing piece that you said, which is like, we're going to get through it. That's why you can't walk away, because that's as a leader, you've got to instill that confidence that we're going to get through this. And I didn't fully appreciate that until you said it, which is that's being able to manage conflict is another brick of that foundation, that the team can trust you. That trust is built not just on when things are going well, but when things go bump. And that's so important.
That's good. That's good. Well, excellent. We are at time. And so in this episode, we discussed creating or encouraging a healthy conflict, leaders who encourage healthy conflict, and some of the benefits. And one of those things being, conflict is not negative. It can be very constructive. It is really all about colliding perspectives, backgrounds, and opinions, and being open to those diverse conversations that will lead to learning, growth, development, innovation, engagement. There's so many benefits to healthy conflict. And really, all conflict, we talked about, landed on the term healthy conflict, but it's really all in how you respond that makes it healthy or unhealthy. And so we'll leave you with that, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for tuning in to Leadership Unfiltered. We hope you have found value in our conversation and are ready to take action in your leadership journey. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe, share, and leave us a review. And don't forget to connect with us on social media for more leadership insights and resources. Until next time, keep leading with purpose.